Our research participants in the project, and the Hoxby story and the work that they're doing around well-being I found really compelling. They also happen to be an all-remote company, so I thought Caroline would be the perfect person to talk to us about these issues. Thank you for joining us, Caroline and Adrianne. And can I start by asking you, Caroline, if you could tell us a little bit about what kind of business Hoxby is and what is its ethos?
Of course, thank you. Thank you very much for the invite to join the webinar today. Firstly, I'm absolutely delighted to be here. It's, like you said, it's unprecedented times, but hopefully we can share some really good ideas and some examples of what we've been doing in a remote environment. So as Carmen said, Hoxby, we are a 100% remote organisation. We are a group, a community of freelancers. So we only have 2 employees. Those are our co-founders at Hoxby, and our business is providing services across a wide range of areas, including HR, PR, innovation, future-proofing and creative solutions to our clients. So we have a community of over 1,000 professionals on a global scale performing projects and client delivery in these sorts of areas. As I said, we're 100% remote, and our ethos is very much focused on what we call everybody having their own work style. So instead of people working flexibly, which implies you work around the core hours of 9 to 5 in an office, everybody sets their own work style. So your work style might be to work 9 to 5. It might be to work evenings and nights, or to work every Monday, for example. And what we do at Hoxby is we take the client's deliverables, and we then form a team where people deliver high quality support and deliverables to the clients, but in their own work style. So it means our ethos is around people fitting work around their life as opposed to fitting their life around work, but it also does not compromise the quality of delivery to our clients. Our clients involve people like Merck, who are a pharmaceutical business, Amazon, Unilever. So we work with some huge global organizations, and our view is that we can deliver it in more of a future-proofed way and a different way of working to more traditional businesses.
Brilliant, thank you. And can we start with a sort of general conversation about remote working? Can I ask, what is it like to have an entirely virtual workforce, since you have more experience than the rest of us with it? And for example, how does communication work? What are some of the barriers and enablers that you've encountered?
Sure. So at Hoxby, it's all we've ever known. So we're a business, we're 5 years old next month, and we've always been remote. So from a Hoxby perspective, it's all we've ever known. But I joined Hoxby from more of a traditional organisation. So I went through that learning curve as well of understanding what it's like to work remotely. So we use a platform called Slack, which I'm sure many of you know, that is effectively our virtual workplace. We have no internal email at all. In fact, it's banned. So everything is on Slack, all communication. We hold every meeting through videos. So this sort of session for me is just totally normal, having a video meeting, and just keeping my fingers crossed that my children don't run in. So this is really normal, and we have a video on policy. So the way that we really drive communication is that we have a lot of face-to-face chats and conversation. We use Slack for all professional discussions to communicate around what's going on in the business, for personal chatting as you would do if you were sitting next to somebody, and we use Google Hangouts and the G Suite tools to be able to communicate and work across time zones as much as we need to. So I think there are different ways and different sort of skills that you need and behaviours you need to learn, and I think in a remote setting, what we find is that you need to over communicate more to break down the barrier of not just being able to swing your chair around and have a conversation with your team colleague behind you. So we do have to flex that, but we do rely really heavily on the tech that we have to be able to enable that as much as possible.
Right, thank you. And can I ask, how do you make sure that people feel connected and included? Do you, for example, take social breaks together? How might you celebrate an achievement, for example?
Yeah, so we have lots of ways that we try and connect people, because if you've never actually met somebody, it's a very different way to kind of form a relationship. And obviously that's quite different for companies that are now being kind of forced into this remote working scenario, because they already had that personal relationship. But we have a number of different ways. So we do have remote get-togethers. We have what we call freelancer get-togethers, where people jump on and they eat lunch, or have what we call a virtual cuppa, where everyone just grabs a cup of tea and will join and socialize as you would in an office environment. Previous to the sort of unfortunate situation now, we did have physical get-togethers, but we've moved those to an online Google Hangouts meetings. For example, we'll do like a pub quiz, or we'll have get-togethers where people join online instead of in person. And we've got a quite established way of recognition at Hoxby, where we have what we call Hoxby Heroes. And every week, people from around the community nominate people that have supported them or delivered fantastic work, so that we celebrate every Friday afternoon. That gets sent out, and we celebrate people's successes. So it's all about, I think, putting more effort into making sure we're connecting through communications, but also recognition and appreciation to others as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And so I wanted to talk about well-being. It's a critical issue for remote workers. Personal resilience is important, and people have to pay really careful attention to their diet, their exercise, their mental health, especially when there's a global crisis going on outside the door. So at Hoxby, recently, but before coronavirus, you had actually launched a really innovative well-being program for your workforce. And can you tell us about the business drivers that led to this program and sort of its different components?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're unique in the fact that we're remote, but we're also unique in the fact that we're a freelance community. So people aren't employed by Hoxby, but that doesn't mean that they don't have the same innate well-being needs as somebody that's employed by a company. And so one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is differentiating ourselves from other freelancer platforms. So we're not just a jobs board, we are a community of people, and there's a support element in that. So we recognised from a business perspective that one of the things that people were crying out for was wellbeing support. And in an employment setting, you get that as part of the perks of being an employee. But freelancers have tended not to have that support. So we were listening to our people and really hearing that this is what they wanted, and that we needed to deliver it in a different way, because obviously we can't do an ergonomic desk assessment or an on-site fitness class or have somebody come in and talk about nutrition. We needed to kind of Hoxbyfy it and make it virtual and remote and accessible to everybody. So the business driver was just listening and hearing, this is really important to us, and it's something that freelancers weren't getting elsewhere.
Brilliant. And then, so your program that you did it in, was it January or February of this year?
Yes, February, yeah.
Can you tell me about what the different activities were and how that worked?
Yeah, so as you can probably tell, wellbeing is an absolute passion of mine. So I will try not to go on about it far too much. But we launched our first wellbeing week in the first week of February, and we ran 11 sessions across that week, all held through Gmeet, and we tried to look at wellbeing as holistically as possible. So we had physical fitness classes, we had yoga classes that people joined, we had areas around mental health, so we had a mindfulness session, guided visualizations, and we then had more learning opportunities. So we had one of our colleagues run a French lesson, we had sessions around learning about Hoxby, and then we also had sessions to connect people, because connection is so central to wellbeing. We had a freelancer get together, we had coffee catch-ups, we had all of these different sorts of things. And we also had something around financial well-being. So how, as a freelancer, you can look after your own financial well-being. And we ran all of those as sort of 45-minute sessions online. People could sign up. And then we one of the things we'll do in the future is record those, but we ran them online as kind of one-off sessions. And one of the things that we tried to do, and we succeeded in that Wellbeing Week, was to say all of our sessions are developed by and using the skills of people in the community, and they're paid to run those sessions. And we ran them for Hoxby's completely for free. So all of the community had the option to join the programme as many sessions as they wanted to, and benefit from the programme. And we were delighted that we had over 220 people sign up to the sessions. So it was a resounding success and had just an amazing level of engagement.
Fantastic. And can you share some of the key learnings, for example, were there topics that resonated more with your community, or?
Yeah, so I think there were some surprising learnings. I thought the physical fitness would be more popular, and actually it wasn't as popular as the sessions around mental health. So the mindfulness and the guided visualizations and the breathing techniques, and really giving people a really short space of time in the day just to focus on themselves and how they're feeling and their mental well-being, which I think is so critically important now in where we are globally at this point in time. So that was really, really important. People really benefited as well from the sessions we ran connecting people. As a freelancer and as a remote worker, it can be quite lonely. If you work at home or you live on your own and you're now working remotely, beating that loneliness is so important. And people just appreciate grabbing a cup of tea or coffee, sitting down and talking to like-minded people about work, personal stuff, what's going on in the world. So we found that those were really important. We sent out a survey after the Wellbeing Week to get people's feedback, and also asked what more or less they'd like. And it really was that mental health side of thing, that side of wellbeing that people really found most compelling.
Right, fantastic. And as I mentioned, this was all stuff you were doing pre-coronavirus at Hoxby, but the world has changed quite significantly, quite quickly. And I wondered if you could tell us about some of the ways that you're innovating and responding to this crisis in particular.
Yeah, so for us at Hoxby and our ways of working, nothing much really changes because we've always worked remotely. We've got the tech, we've got the ways of working. The difference for us is that, as everybody is, with family commitments and other, caring commitments and everything else that's going on, we're having to flex our own work styles and ways of working around suddenly becoming, part-time educators and everything else we've got to do. So from a ways of working, that's our biggest change. But from the wellbeing perspective, we've brought forward our next Wellbeing Week to next week, because we felt that at this point in time, more than ever, people really need to focus on their own well-being, from a health, physical fitness, mental, self-care perspective. So at Hoxby, we've brought forward our Wellbeing Week to next week, and it will be ran across the week. We've got now about 15 sessions running, and again, it's open and free to everybody. And the other development that we've done is we have opened up that Wellbeing Week to anybody that wants to join. So for example, anybody that's on this call today is welcome to join, as are their colleagues and their family members, or whoever they want to can join any of our sessions for free. So from our perspective, we've responded, we can see that Hoxby's internally need more support with wellbeing than ever, and actually if we're feeling like this, then everybody will be feeling like this, I'm sure. So that's the key change that we've made, is that we've launched a kind of side initiative called Remote Workmates to try and offer support to people and take what we've learned at Hoxby and share that. And we've extended our wellbeing work to now be open publicly as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And everybody, we're sharing a link in the chat to that initiative. And that answers one of the questions that we had about have you seen a change in the needs of your community since coronavirus? And Adrianne, I'm going to turn to you with a couple of questions, but before I do, I see there's one question for you, Caroline, in the chat. A little bit earlier, you had mentioned that there are some key behaviors that are different that you need in a pure remote working scenario. And could you share what some of those key behaviors are?
Yeah, I think one of the really critical things is probably two of the main ones for me are the difference in the level of trust that I think you need to have with the people that you work with, because you can't turn around and have a conversation with someone, see what they're doing, or you have to really have a higher level of trust, I believe, in a remote working environment to lean on and see the deliverables from your team. And the second thing I think is the goals and the deliverables that you set for people. And I think it becomes increasingly important in a remote working environment to set really specific and clear goals for the people that you're working with, so that they can deliver, rather than being able to see somebody all the time and be able to really follow up with them on an hour by hour basis.
Right, brilliant, thank you. So Adrianne, I just have a couple of questions for you, and then we can open it up to questions from everyone. I wanted to ask, do you have any advice drawing from the Hoxby experience for leaders managing remote teams? Because this is clearly going to be a big issue front of mind for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So in the first instance, I think it goes back to just what Caroline was talking about, and trust, and building that trust, and that trust in ways. And the way that trust is built is by, as an employee or as a freelancer, doing what you say you're going to do, and then as a leader, giving space for people to do that, and allowing it to be done, maybe not the way you think it has to, but that creativity to come through from the teams. And it's really shifting that mindset from, because I see that you're at your desk and I see that you don't have Facebook open, I know you're working, to actually, we're going to measure you on what you're delivering. And as your leader, I'm going to break down the tasks and something that I can measure and something that I can help support you with. And then we're going to talk about when is a reasonable amount of time to deliver that. So I think from a very pragmatic point of view, it's those steps of shifting, because I see you're here, you're getting it done, to because you're delivering what you say you're going to do in the time frame, I know you're working. Right. And when we shift that mindset, then it allows people to work around children and to work around schools appointments or doctor's appointments. In our community, a lot of people join our community not just because they're parents, but because they might have underlying illnesses, or they might be carers, or they might just have a passion for scuba diving. And all of that is really valuable. And so when you have that trust, you allow them the time to do the other things that are on their mind, which I think in a typical work environment, they're sitting at their desk, but their mind is thinking, I'm missing the school play. I'm worried about my mom. I don't feel well. And so we're not always allowing them to do the things, to release that time and space to do that.
Sorry, I had to take myself off mute. So flexibility and trust and clarity really are key behaviors for managers. Yeah. And can I ask, and this might be a question for both you and Caroline, actually, thinking about when we emerge from this crisis, I'm very excited to start thinking about when we emerge from the crisis. There'll be, I think there'll be a need to upskill workforces around good remote working practices, and also around there'll be a need for organizations to plug technology gaps. These are two very different sort of needs, but I wonder if you could speak from your experience at Hoxby on either of these issues.
Sure. So I think, as Caroline was talking about, that we always have a camera on policy. And so having a space to work in, it doesn't really matter where that space is, but a set space that you work in that you know is where you do that activity, that's comfortable, a good camera. If that's not on your laptop, a camera is 20 pounds from Amazon. And those hygiene factors make it a lot easier from a technology and basics standpoint to just start to get into the game. And I think when you can finally, okay, I've got that done, then, and I should say, there's so many people of my clients that go, oh, I have no makeup on today, or my hair's a mess. Just get on camera. I mean, obviously we've done ourselves up today because this is a really, big honor, but most days we don't. And when you lose that inhibition and that vulnerability, you get past that and you start to share fantastic ideas. And that's where that interaction starts to happen. And then the next thing is to talk about that, that great communication about when you're available and when you're not available, and set those boundaries. We have no problem telling each other that's out of my work style, but I could look at that piece of work here and deliver it. When do you need it by? And if it is urgent, I flex my work style and got something done. But on the other hand, that's also been great for someone to say, I can't do it at that point. I'll deliver it by then. And that lets me know that that's when I'll have it. So being upfront about when you're available and what you're available to do.
So clarity, but also boundaries that are respected on both sides of the equation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Excellent. I see lots of questions coming through now, so maybe we can smoothly move into part two, member questions. I'm going to ask a few from the chat, but also members, please feel free to unmute yourselves and jump in. So just to kick off, we have a question about kids at home. Do you guys have any key learning or advice about how to manage working from home with kids' needs and interruptions?
Oh my goodness, both Adrianne and I have children and have been on video calls together and been interrupted by our children. So I think one of the things that, you know, it's life. We are all locked down now. We've got the children at home. It's life. It's going to happen. And actually, I think there's a big thing around acceptance and respecting the fact that everyone's juggling a million things and spinning a million plates. So we're all, you know, we do have to work differently and be respectful of the fact that, you know, my kids might run in and they shouldn't run in at any time. But, you know, I think one of the things that I've personally done is, you know, my husband and I have a schedule of who's working and who's looking after the kids, and respecting the fact that that is that other person's work time. And, you know, I understand that not everybody can do that, but that has worked really successfully for us. We're based in Barcelona, so we've been locked down for 2 weeks now, and we've kind of got into a groove of working in that way. And so I think that is really critically important, of respecting work time as opposed to family time.
Yeah. So I've got 3 kids. I have 5-year-old twins and a nearly 10-year-old. And a lot of my Hoxby colleagues know my 5-year-old boy, Ashton. He comes in and does his little chat and then leaves. I have enough space to have an office. If my door's shut, then they can't come in. But that's really only on calls like this or client calls that are really important. Other calls that are interaction with teammates, then the kids come in and they say stuff and then they leave. And I think it's really important for our kids' mental health to validate that actually they are the most important in this situation. Their mental health, above all, is far more important than that lost 5 minutes of productivity. And in fact, it brings us such a wonderful human side. You see everybody's face light up when the kids and the pets come into the room. We all love that moment. And I think this is giving us a real opportunity to see who all of us are outside of this work persona that we have.
Mm-hmm. Which can reinforce trust, my hunch is. There are some more questions filtering through, but I wanted to give other people an opportunity. Is there anybody out there on the call who'd like to unmute and ask a question? I'll count to 10 and then I'll just ask another question. No? Okay, I'll ask another question then. This was one that came through specifically for you, Caroline. Can you develop the concept of set your own work style? In practice, how does that work around teamwork?
Yes, absolutely. So work style is a term that we coined at Hoxby for the way that we work. So, and the way that we believe everybody can theoretically work. So as Adrianne said, everybody has things in their life that, you know, they might have family, they might have caring commitments, they might have non-exec directorships, they might have volunteering work, or they just might love scuba diving, to use Adrianne's example. And what we believe is that people should be able to set how and when and where they work. So work style basically means you are free to say, as a person, based on my life, I want to work 40 hours a week, but I'm going to do 2 of those days over the weekend, and I'm only going to work between 9 and 5. And then what we then do is, when we are delivering for clients, we explain what the deliverables are from that client, and then we create a team, a project team, based on work style that fits for the client's delivery. So for example, if we're delivering for a client who are based in Europe, then, you know, we will say to people, you need to be available in, you know, Central European time. Or if it's an American client, then we'll flex it around that. And then we build a team based on skills and capabilities and the work styles that fit. So if you can't deliver because of your work style, then you can't be on that project team. But we try and respect people's work styles and how they want to work and how they want to live as much as possible. And it is a different way of working. And as I said, I came from a much more traditional background before I joined Hoxby. But it's incredibly liberating to think, I'm setting how I want to work, not just I work between the hours of 8 and 6 or 9 and 5, and I get to choose where I work from. So I can be the people director for Hoxby, even though I live in Barcelona and I'm not in the UK, because actually there's no head office. I don't have to be limited by a postal code. So work style for us is very much believing that we're redefining how you work, where you work, and when you work, but without compromising the quality of delivery that you give to clients.
Right, thank you. Does anybody else out there have questions? We can sort of blend part 2 and 3 if anybody wants to share a story and experience, ask a question of each other. I'm really eager there are 52 of you, so I know somebody must be burning to say something. Nobody?
So in the meantime, I'm seeing a very interesting chat around behaviors happening. And I love behaviors. I love competencies. I'm such a nerd in that area. I love being able to define those unique qualities that mean that you've got a really highly productive team. And I love Michael's response to James that if we look at what our organizational values are and then work down to those behaviors, that's how you can start to define those behaviors. And that's what we did within Hoxby. So, you know, our core values are around creating a happier world, play your part, always improving, better together, love what you do, and work style. And when we come onto teams, we talk about that and we say, you know, this is what we're delivering, this is what we're going to do. And in order to do that, this is what I need you to do. And when I act as a project lead to deliver work, that I talk about how I need you to be upfront with your communication. You need to be a really great communicator online. Talk to us. We say work out loud. Talk to us on your Slack channel about how you've gotten the work done. And what I recognize is that for us who have been in this for some time, we have really honed our written communication skills, because that's what we're doing. And for those of us that are coming to remote working because of the situation, or you might have turned around and asked the question, it will take time to hone those skills of what is being done, where you are in a project. And so I think that is one behavior and skill that you can help support on, is trying to break stuff down with great questions. Talk to me about where you are in this project. What do I need to do for you to help you achieve this? Are you worried? And to also not be afraid to speak out loud to a whole team to say, I'm really struggling with this. That took a lot of vulnerability once we started to join Hoxby, because we were very corporified in our mind to not say, I don't know how to do something. But now it's real common. Like, we just say, I don't know how to do this. Who knows how to do it? Who can coach me on that? And there's no judgment on that. So I think that's a second thing. Great communicator. Let's leave the judgments at the door on how people are communicating and what they're saying.
So there's a huge importance of psychological safety.
Absolutely.
And how did you break down that sort of barrier and sort of decorporify your mind and become so comfortable?
Gosh, I think it was people responding to me in a really honest way. And so then I thought, they are a nice group of people. I've been with Hoxby for about 18 months. Right. Okay. We are dealing with honest people. And then not being afraid to say, hey, do you know you've made a real difference in my thinking? And Caroline and I as colleagues started with that, and I remember texting her and saying, I need to let you know you've really helped my thinking. And so then that trust started to being built. So I'm a huge fan of Brene Brown and learned a lot from her talks about vulnerability and knowing that I'm not going to do everything right today, but I have an opportunity to learn and to share. And actually, it's so much better when we can share it together. So much better.
I have had a couple of more interesting questions come through. One is, how do you manage an online meeting when you know there's likely to be conflict?
Oh, gosh. I mean,
I don't think you'd manage it in any different way than you would if you were in person, to be honest. If I anticipate conflict, then I think, it's the same. I think I'd manage it in exactly the same way as I would, because we're video on, there's no ability to actually be hiding or doing something else while you're in the meeting. And so for me, I just treat it exactly the same way, but instead of being physically with someone, I'm virtually with them. So for me, it would be exactly the same behaviors, I think.
I think I'm really much more conscious that there's a positive to it and a risk with working virtually. So the positive is that if there is conflict, that you can say, right, we're at a point of conflict. We're going to call it a halt here, but we're going to come back and think about stuff and come back online. And we all have our opportunity to go to our safer place, get that cup of tea and not see each other in the break room and really reflect on where our conflict's coming from. The risk is that we all have the opportunity to walk away and not resolve it. And our project leaders are really at the crux of the people that pull stuff together and saying, we're having this conflict, what do we need to do? And I think when we get to the point of resolving that, it's coming back to our values and saying, we're better together. So everybody's opinion is valuable. Whether or not that opinion leads to that's the answer is not sure. It's very much driven by what we need to deliver for the client. But their opinion has value, and I think that's definitely how we resolve our conflict and get to that way forward after there is conflict.
And can I ask sort of a question about how did you achieve the culture of having video on always?
There was no option. That's what happens. If we come onto a Zoom and people don't have videos on, Alex and Lizzie or whoever's leading it will say, you need to turn your video on, and it will stop until you've done that. And you catch us having meals and top knots and animals walking through, and it doesn't matter because you're all there thinking about whatever situation that we're discussing.
Okay. And could either of you give some tips on how to reduce the team's anxiety considering the current situation that we're all in?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think this is not Hoxby specific. It's a challenge that we've all got at this point in time. I think one of the things that this crisis has shown me at Hoxby is that we're leaning on each other even more. And we're sharing, news articles, we're talking about it, and we're actually connecting and getting together more. So we've been doing more of our just like jump on at lunchtime and just get together and chat about things. So I think, it's very, very much around understanding and reaching out to people and finding out, what is your situation? How are you coping at home? Have you got people that are relying on you? over communicating, you know, showing people that we care and that actually work obviously is critically important and we have to deliver, but also, you know, this is a global crisis that we're all going through together. So I think showing the very human side of it as well. And I really feel and see and hear so much more communication and personal interactions through our usual channels, whether it be Slack or video calls and, you know, off on WhatsApp and whatever else. And it's just putting the human side of things right at the center of how we are as at work and outside of work.
So as different work groups, so I look after all of the HR work, and we pull together our whole HR team. And what I recognize is HR is usually the NHS of an organization. We're the ones that are still at the front line, making sure things are happening, even if we're the ones that are sick. And so we often have to quash a lot of our emotions and what we're feeling about stuff, and being very aware of that we pull together. And some of the things that we talked about was helping each other decipher what is real factual information and what is fake news, and making sure that we are really reminded of using facts in all of our conversations and not subscribing to hysteria. So that, and then as Caroline said, just talking. Hey, I'm scared about this. Even just being able to say I'm scared to other people has made it so much better, and making sure that that's that safe place, which builds the trust again.
Another question that has come through is, do you have any advice for managing more junior members of staff who are less autonomous in their roles?
Yeah, I mean, I think from my experience, it goes back to setting these really clear and specific deliverables. And I think, for a lot of people working autonomously, working from home, working at different times is going to be a big transition. And I think that's the difference between just working at home and working remotely. Working at home might be, I need to work at home on a Friday as a one-off because I've got a delivery coming, or, you know, for whatever reason. But working at home, working remotely on an ongoing period, I think is quite different. So for me, I think for our leaders, it's really important that we really break down people's roles into really core deliverables so that we can help them manage what they have to deliver and see the achievements of what they are delivering. And just really strongly communicating with people, finding out, okay, now you're going to be working remotely. How do you want to work? Do you want to touch base once a day? Do you want that to be a video call? Do you just want to use email? What's best for you? So that person understands what they've got to deliver. So one of the things some people do is, like, every morning put on a list of, these are the things I want to achieve today, and then halfway through the day you check in with them and say, hey, you had this list of 6 things, how are you getting on? Anything you need support with? So there's lots of, you know, smaller things that we can do to help people that have never worked in this way before.
And I think it's really important when you do that. So when someone takes the time, when you start to say, hey, new person who's trying to work autonomously, you tell me what you think you're going to work on. That's going to help them to create that mindset. Respond back to it straight away. What they've missed in the office is that really quick feedback. And so for a week or two, you might have to be very responsive on emails with those people. And with your more senior team members, you need to tell them, hey, I might not get back to you until this time. Is that okay? And really set up those contracts about the communication style. It will help your more junior and newer employees to this work style know when to expect to hear from you, so they're not fretting, they're not thinking and overthinking, I've done something wrong, it's not right. And it's going to help you set your own boundaries as well. So that regular feedback and saying, hey, you've done great here, do more of the same, or do less of this, is really going to help establish that way of work. It's probably going to take us about 2 weeks until this becomes a norm. And And I think at one time I was hopeful that in 2 weeks this would be done. And I don't think where it's going to be. I think we need to be planning for something that's much longer. So it's worth the investment.
Yeah.
Time to do it.
I think you're right, Adrianne. I think we were all at that phase where we thought this will be over in 2 weeks, and how quickly that went away. So we've had a question that's come in for absolutely anybody on the call. So I'm going to encourage, there are 48 of you here. So does anyone have any experience to share about a mixed workforce? So this is James Isaac. He's asking, we have about half of our workforce working in factories, service environments, or engineering and software labs that can't work remotely. Does anyone have any experiences of creating trust and maturity between the different parts of the organization around remote working?
I guess I can come in the loop.
Oh, thank you very much.
So I am Pascal Goy, and I'm working at CERN, and CERN is the largest laboratory of particle physics in the world. And I would say our mission is to actually build infrastructures. So we do have a large population of engineers and technicians. And for these people, teleworking is not an option. They have to be in the tunnel, and we can hardly think that they're going to pull the wires when they're at home. So they are kind of forced to be on, I would say, unemployment, if you want. So our experience with these people is not easy. And to be true, we've only had a very few days, like everybody around, in this meeting, to find out some solutions. I think the best thing was first to create a certain part of trust, saying that this situation is what it is, and given their professions, their jobs, they have no choice. So it was about organizing a real infrastructure, administrative infrastructure, to make them feel good with the fact that they can't work. And it starts obviously with learning that they can stay home. They will know that they won't be able to perform their task, and that they will be paid. Because, this is the end of the story. So if you're working in an organization that is to do with hard skills, and where teleworking is not possible, you need to reassure people with the fact that their contract will continue or will not suffer from this situation, from the fact that they can't deliver their usual output. And as I have the floor, I'm going to just also maybe ask another question. I had no time to write it, I'm sorry. I'd be curious to know from you how a traditional organization like ours, because this is it, a traditional should, what are the first steps such an organization should put in place in order to help people who are used to work in a very traditional way to adapt to teleworking, and to adapt to the fact that you don't need to be in front of your computer from 8 o'clock in the morning until no time, and not feeling guilty because, we know that maybe in a month's time we are back at work, which means we know that in a month's time we're going to have to come back to our usual patterns, our usual behaviors, being in the office. Maybe in two months, I have no clue about the timing of this. But what would be your tips? What do you believe we should try to put in place in order to bring that trust that is probably a little bit shaped at the moment, because we are struggling with old habits, and the fact that being pushed into teleworking, we can't work as usual. We are reasonable people, intelligent people, but spending a day at home when you're not used to it is not an easy thing. So what would be your tips? Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much. So does anybody, Adrianne, Caroline, or anybody on the call have tips for building trust for people who are finding themselves in a radically different way of working?
Yeah. I think the first thing is have that as an acknowledgement amongst all of the team, and to say, hey, we're working differently. And this is time that you're getting used to working from home. And so for managers, senior leadership, to first line managers, to employees, to say, I know that you're not going to be able to be at your desk, and I don't expect you to be. And I also don't expect that if I choose to reply to an email at 8 p.m., that you need to reply to me by 8:30. So I think setting out those expectations from the senior leadership to the middle management to first line to the whole general employee population is really critical. And to also set the expectations of, this is what's still really critical that we have to get done. So the must-haves versus the nice-to-haves versus the we can do this later, and really start to redefine that work so that employees find it easier to know what they need to do first.
Yeah, and I think just building on that as well, one of the risks of remote working is that somebody doesn't stop working. So it can be, if you're working remotely, then it's not, oh, everyone's left the office, it's 5:30, I better get my bag and go. And actually, if you're engrossed in something, what we also need to say to people is try and follow the same structure of your day as you would have done if you were coming into the office. You don't have to commute, brilliant. And there's not, you don't have some of those touch points that you would be seeing in an office, but there's no reason why you can't say, I'm going to switch on my kit at 9 a.m. and then at 1 o'clock I'm going to stop for lunch and I'm going to take a whole hour and do something else, and then take coffee breaks in the middle to make sure that they're not ending up in front of their computer working and not stopping. Yeah. And I think people have a misconception that if you work from home and work remotely that you're not working. And actually, as a remote worker, sometimes you find that you work more because you have less distractions of other people to talk to or things going on in the office. And actually, you don't have that clock out type mentality. So I think it's about people also thinking and almost writing it down, if that helps, a daily kind of schedule of, I'm going to finish work, I'm going to have my dinner, I'm going to do some exercise or something like that, so that people feel like they have got some sense of normality, even though they're not doing what they'd normally do. And I actually think that if this lasts, I think people are going to see a different way of working. And I think that it may lead to people saying, do you know what, this actually could work. I can deliver my role remotely. And actually, not in this current environment, but I could like it to work a bit differently to how I've always done it before. So it could be refreshing for some people as well in this. It could be a silver lining from this horrible situation we're all in at the moment.
Yeah. Well, that really speaks to one of the questions that we still have in the question lobby. Do you believe that this crisis will impact the processes and work model in the world after the crisis? Will we return to the same routine or not?
Gosh,
and yeah, I think we're going to give people an insight into a different way of working. And at Hoxby, we're kind of biased in this sense that we've always worked remotely, we've always had our own work styles, and we know it can work. But actually, for other people, it's a change of mindset, and it's not going to work for every type of role. Appreciate that. If you're a pilot, you can't work from home, you can't work remotely. But for a lot of occupations, it can be incredibly effective, incredibly productive, and incredibly empowering and satisfying for individuals as well. So I think it is going to signal a shift in how people choose to work when they see, actually, I don't have to be in a physical office between 9 to 5 to deliver amazing outputs in my role.
Brilliant, thank you. So I'm very conscious that we only have about 5 minutes. There's one last question that would be one for absolutely everyone. So even though you've all been very quiet, you've asked lots of questions, so thank you. And this question is from Paul McFarland. Is Slack the best collaborative tool that you have found? We're using MS Teams, but would like to know what other people are using out there: Zoom, MS Teams, calendars, and how to manage continuous WhatsApp messages. Does anybody have any thoughts about sort of technology around remote working? Because Caroline and Adrianne will pitch in if nobody else, but an opportunity if anybody else wants to share their experiences.
Hi, it's James Isaac here. Can you hear me?
James. Yes.
Cool. I don't know if I can offer any positive advice, but I mean, we're personally just switching from something called Circuit to Teams, and Teams is far better, Microsoft Teams. But other than that, what is really challenging, I think, for us is just the number of different applications out there. And we're all sort of jumping onto different applications because there's not enough bandwidth at the moment and that sort of thing. So that's perhaps exacerbating the problem. But if you think about that in terms of just the social media applications as well, WhatsApp, our own internal social media, all these different methods, and sometimes it just feels like you are being bombarded from all sides. So I don't know what the answer is. I don't think we've cracked it at all, but it certainly feels pretty overwhelming sometimes.
Yes, thank you, James. Caroline, were you saying something? I think you're on mute.
Sorry, am I off mute? Oh, fantastic. I think you're right, James. It's about feeling overwhelmed. And I think what we've tried to do at Hoxby is just use Slack. So we do not use email at all. So you know that your communication method is Slack, and you can turn off the notification. I mean, I'm not a massive, techie, so I'm not going to say that I think Slack is the best thing in the world. But I think it's about, as you said, not overwhelming people and saying we're going to use this form of communication. Otherwise, people are thinking, I've got to check my internal social media, my emails, my WhatsApp, my Slack, and then they don't really know where to go, and that can be quite consuming. But also giving people that license and permission to turn off the notifications. And at work in the office, you might leave your laptop in the office, so you can't work at home. But actually, when you're doing everything remotely, you've got it on probably your iPad, your laptop, your desktop, your phone, and encouraging people to switch off. Otherwise, you're going to find people are going to, be working and find it completely overwhelming. So I think you're right, James.
Thank you. So there's one last question. I know we're absolutely out of time, so I'm just going to mention this one and then I'll go into thank yous and goodbyes. But Susanna says, I work for a very traditional organization where data and findings usually help to sell an idea. Do you have any studies you would recommend to be used as a support to remote working advantages? So two things. One, Susanna, I wrote a short review of some of the research on remote working, which I'll follow up and send to you. And does anybody else know of any evidence base for the value of remote?
Yes, happy to chip in. So Mike here from Engage. Actually, we've obviously been looking more into this now given the current crisis, but research we have going back from several years now has actually shown that both remotely employed and, interestingly, remotely managed employees actually tend to be more engaged than their traditional working counterparts. And it's for a lot of the reasons that were mentioned on the call today, almost more communication than you'd get in a traditional office. And when you do have check-ins with your manager, they tend to be more structured and follow around a specific agenda as opposed to things that might get bumped within an office or a bit more off the cuff. So yeah, happy to share any findings we have as well, if that's helpful for anyone on the call.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mike. So very quickly now, I'll say thank you to everyone for joining us today. Please note that we're going to make the content available on demand. The link will be included in the post-meeting notes, along with the links to Hoxby's Wellbeing Week and other resources, which their Wellbeing Week is next week. I've seen cooking classes, painting classes, career development stuff. It looks great. So please look out for that to come to you on Monday. If you have any feedback on the session itself, as we are experimenting and learning, please do let us know by emailing athena@crforum.co.uk. And finally, please note in your diary our next Zoom event, which is our regularly scheduled spring lecture. It's moving online next week, Bringing Down the Walls, Lessons in Social Mobility with Professor Arturo Brice of IMD. So that'll be Tuesday the 31st at 3 p.m. GMT, and he will also be discussing his coronavirus research. And thank you all for your time.